Attila the Hun became one of the most feared figures in late Roman history when he rose to sole power over the Huns in the mid-5th century. Before his rise, the Huns had already pushed Germanic tribes into Roman lands. He first appears as joint ruler with his brother Bleda around 434 AD. When Bleda died about a decade later, Attila took full control. From that point, decisions about war, peace, and payments rested entirely in his hands. As sole ruler, Attila turned the Huns into a united fighting force aimed at both halves of the Roman world. From his base on the Great Hungarian Plain, Hunnic mounted archers could cross the Danube with speed, strike deep into the Balkans, and vanish before field armies could react. When payments were late or terms disputed, Attila treated it as a reason to invade. Towns were burned, fields ruined, and whole regions emptied as people fled toward fortified cities. In 451, Attila shifted his attention west and invaded Gaul. His army moved along the Rhine and into the interior, attacking cities and spreading fire, plunder, and panic. The advance was finally checked at a huge battle on the Catalonian plains, where a coalition of Romans and Visigoths met him in a brutal clash that left tens of thousands dead and forced him to pull back. The next year, he crossed the Alps into Italy, pushed into the Po Valley, and put major cities under threat. Refugees streamed south, famine and disease followed his marching columns, and for a brief moment, even Rome itself seemed within reach. The scale of destruction surrounding his name led many Christian writers to see something more than an ordinary warlord. In their eyes, Attila was the scourge of God. In Latin, they called him flagellum Dei, the whip of God, a man allowed by heaven to punish the sins and failures of the Roman Empire. Preachers and chroniclers used his story as a warning about what happens when a society grows weak and corrupt. Attila never claimed that title, but it stuck. In 453, he died suddenly, reportedly during a wedding celebration. Without his authority, the Hunnic Confederation quickly splintered as subject peoples rebelled and rival leaders fought for power. Yet the damage remained. His campaigns had already pushed other tribes deeper into Roman territory, shaken frontier defenses, and helped turn a struggling empire toward its final collapse. In 1066, William, Duke of Normandy, turned a disputed claim to the English throne into one of the most decisive conquests in medieval Europe. A distant cousin of Edward the Confessor, William argued that Edward had promised him the crown, and that Harold Godwinson had sworn an oath to support his claim. When Edward died in January 1066 and Harold was crowned king, William prepared for war. He secured the support of the papacy, recruited knights from across Normandy and northern France with promises of land, and assembled an invasion fleet on the Norman coast. On September 28, 1066, he landed at Pevensey in southern England with around 7,000 troops, a mix of Norman, Breton, and French infantry, archers, and cavalry, and began ravaging the surrounding countryside to force Harold into battle. The confrontation came on October 14th, 1066, at the Battle of Hastings. Harold's exhausted army, which had just marched south after defeating a Norwegian invasion at Stamford Bridge, formed a shield wall on the high ground of Senlac Hill. For most of the day, the English line held against repeated Norman assaults. William's army combined infantry attacks, archery, and cavalry charges, and at key moments used feigned retreats to lure parts of the English force off the ridge, where they were cut down. Late in the battle, Harold was killed, later tradition says by an arrow to the eye, and much of the Anglo-Saxon nobility fell with him. With the English army shattered and perhaps 4,000 English soldiers dead, organized resistance collapsed. In the months that followed, William advanced on London, received the submission of leading clergy and nobles, and was crowned King of England on Christmas Day 1066 in Westminster Abbey. His rule brought profound changes. He confiscated vast estates from Anglo-Saxon lords and redistributed them to his Norman followers, replacing much of the native aristocracy. Castles, such as the Tower of London, were built to secure control over the population. The Domesday Book, completed in 1086, recorded land holdings and resources across his realm, reflecting a tightly controlled feudal system. William's conquest bound England more closely to continental Europe and laid the foundations of a new Anglo-Norman kingdom whose political and social structures would shape English history for centuries. In 1206, after years of civil war on the steppe, Temujin was formally proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler, at a great council of Mongol leaders called the Kurultai. From that moment, his focus shifted from unifying the tribes to projecting Mongol power far beyond the grasslands. He reshaped the clans into a disciplined fighting force, organized into units of tens, hundreds, and thousands, with commanders chosen for ability rather than birth. Mounted archers armed with composite bows could travel huge distances, strike suddenly, and then disappear before slower enemies could react. Early campaigns against the Xixia Kingdom and the Jin dynasty in northern China allowed Genghis to refine siege techniques, test new weapons, and practice the use of terror as a deliberate tool of strategy. The most notorious demonstration of terror came during his campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire between 1219 and 1221. After the Khwarezmian ruler executed Mongol envoys and merchants, Genghis Khan responded with total war. Mongol armies crossed Central Asia and systematically targeted the empire's major cities. Bukhara and Samarkand were captured and devastated, with large parts of their populations killed or enslaved. At Urgench and Merv, chroniclers describe the near-total destruction of the inhabitants, with tens or even hundreds of thousands reportedly massacred and irrigation networks deliberately ruined. In several cities, survivors were sorted and executed in groups, and mounds of skulls were left as a warning to others. The aim was not only victory, but to make resistance so frightening that future cities would surrender without a fight. Over the course of Genghis Khan's conquests, millions died through killings, famine, and the collapse of urban and agricultural systems. At the same time, he created the framework of a vast Eurasian empire that encouraged long-distance trade, protected caravan routes, and used relay stations to move messages and officials across thousands of kilometers. By the time of his death in 1227, his domain stretched from northern China to the Caspian Sea. Timur was born in 1336 near Kesh in Transoxiana, in present-day Uzbekistan, and rose from a minor noble background to become one of the most destructive conquerors of the late medieval world. Claiming a connection to Genghis Khan through marriage, he used this association to legitimize his authority among Turkic Mongol elites, and gradually took control of the fractured Chagatai Khanate. By 1370, after years of civil war and shifting alliances, he established Samarkand as his capital and began a series of campaigns that turned much of Central Asia, Persia, the Caucasus, India, and the Middle East into his battlefield. Cities that resisted faced annihilation, with chronicles reporting tens of thousands killed in places like Isfahan and Delhi, where pyramids of severed heads were stacked as warnings. In 1402, at the Battle of Ankara, Timur decisively defeated the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I, capturing him and temporarily halting Ottoman expansion into the Balkans. At its height, Timur's realm stretched from the Sir Darya and Oxus rivers to Syria, and from the Volga steppe to the Persian Gulf. But it remained a personal empire, held together by fear and constant campaigning rather than stable institutions. He died in 1405 while on campaign toward Ming China, and his empire quickly fragmented among rival heirs. The devastation his wars caused led to long-term demographic and economic decline in many regions, even as his court in Samarkand became a center of architecture, art, and scholarship. The Timurid legacy survived through his descendants, including Babur, who later founded the Mughal Empire in India. But in much of the Islamic world, Timur is remembered primarily for the scale of destruction left in the wake of his conquests. Vlad III, known as Vlad the Impaler and later associated with the name Dracula, was born around 1431 in Transylvania, into the ruling family of Wallachia. His father, Vlad II Dracul, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric group sworn to defend Christendom against the Ottomans. Wallachia sat on a volatile frontier between the expanding Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. As a teenager, Vlad and his brother Radu were taken as hostages by the Ottomans to secure their father's loyalty, giving him first-hand experience of both Ottoman power and court politics. After his father and elder brother were killed in factional struggles, Vlad fought a series of campaigns to secure the Wallachian throne, achieving a more stable reign from 1456. His reign focused on breaking the power of the boyar aristocracy, asserting control over Saxon merchants from Transylvanian towns, and resisting Ottoman demands for tribute and manpower. He used terror as a tool of statecraft, ordering mass executions of suspected enemies, most notoriously by impalement, a method in which victims were mounted on tall stakes and left on display. Contemporary reports claim thousands were impaled along major roads or around besieged towns, creating what foreign observers described as forests of the dead. In 1462, when Sultan Mehmed II launched a major campaign against Wallachia, Vlad adopted scorched earth tactics and staged the famous night attack near Târgoviște, attempting to strike directly at the Ottoman camp. Although he inflicted heavy losses, he could not prevent the Ottomans from backing a rival claimant, and he eventually went into exile under Hungarian control. Vlad briefly regained the throne in 1476, but was killed in battle soon afterward. His head was sent to Mehmed II as proof of his death. In regional tradition, he remained a symbol of harsh justice and resistance against the Ottomans, while later Western pamphlets and modern fiction recast him as the archetypal bloodthirsty tyrant and the historical basis for the fictional vampire Count Dracula.